The rain came down like bullets that October night, turning the dirt road leading to my ranch into a river of mud. I'd been living in Montana for 3 years, long enough to know when a storm was just passing through and when it meant business. This one meant business. I stood on the porch of my cabin, watching the lightning crack across the sky like God himself was splitting the heavens open. The horses were secured in the barn, the cattle huddled in the far pasture under what shelter they could find. Everything that could be done had been done. Except I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. My name is James Carver. I'm 42 years old and I've been running this ranch alone since my divorce 5 years ago. Came out here to escape from the city, from my failed marriage, from the expectations of a life I never wanted. The isolation suited me. No neighbors for miles. No one asking questions I didn't want to answer. Just me, the land, and the quiet that came with both. But tonight the quiet was gone. The wind howled through the pine trees, bending them almost horizontal. I was about to head inside when I heard it, a sound that didn't belong to the storm. A crash, followed by what might have been a yell coming from somewhere down the access road. I grabbed my rain slicker and a flashlight, already knowing I was probably being an idiot. Smart people stayed inside during storms like this. But 3 years of isolation had taught me that the distance between smart and paranoid was sometimes just a matter of perspective. The rain soaked through my clothes within seconds. I followed the sound, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness like a knife. About a quarter mile down the road, I found it. A motorcycle, expensive looking, one of those sleek racing bikes, lying on its side in the ditch. The front wheel was still spinning slowly, and the headlight flickered on and off like a dying heartbeat. "Hello," I called out, sweeping my flashlight across the scene. "Anyone there?" That's when I saw him. He was about 20 feet from the bike, lying face down in the mud, one arm stretched out like he'd been trying to crawl. He wasn't moving. My heart kicked into overdrive. I ran to him, dropping to my knees in the mud beside him. "Hey, can you hear me?" No response. I carefully rolled him onto his back and my breath caught. He was young, mid-20s maybe, with dark hair plastered to his face and a cut above his left eyebrow bleeding steadily. But even unconscious, even covered in mud and rain, he was beautiful in a way that made my chest ache. "Come on," I muttered, checking for a pulse. It was there, strong and steady, thank God. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused and filled with pain. They were blue, the kind of blue you see in postcards of tropical oceans, impossibly bright even in the darkness. "Don't move," I said firmly. "You've been in an accident. I'm going to help you." He tried to speak, but only a groan came out. Then his hand shot out, gripping my arm with surprising strength. "I can't." His voice was barely a whisper, raw with panic. "I can't move my legs." The world seemed to stop. I looked down at his legs, sprawled at awkward angles in the mud. My medical training was limited, basic first aid, what you learn when you live alone in the middle of nowhere. But I knew enough to understand that moving someone with a potential spinal injury could paralyze them permanently. "Okay," I said, keeping my voice calm even as my mind raced. "Okay, just stay still. I'm going to get help." "Please." His grip on my arm tightened, those blue eyes locking onto mine with desperate intensity. "Please don't leave me." And that's when I felt it. Not the rain, not the cold, not even the fear that I was in over my head. What I felt was a connection so sudden and powerful that it knocked the breath out of me. Like lightning striking, except instead of destroying, it illuminated something I'd been keeping in the dark for years. This stranger, broken and terrified in the mud, looking at me like I was the only solid thing in a world that had just shattered around him. He needed me. And God help me, I needed to be needed. "I'm not leaving you," I said, and meant it with every fiber of my being. "But I have to call for help. My phone's in my pocket, just hold on." I pulled out my cell phone with shaking hands, praying for a signal. Out here, coverage was spotty at best. The screen lit up one bar. It would have to be enough. I dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? I've got a motorcycle accident victim on Creek Road, about a quarter-mile south of the Carver Ranch turnoff. Male, mid-20s, conscious but reporting he can't move his legs. Possible spinal injury. The dispatcher's voice was professional, efficient. Is he breathing normally? Any visible bleeding? Breathing's normal. Cut on his forehead, bleeding but not severe. He's lying in the mud, exposed to the elements. Storm's bad out here. EMS is dispatched, but with the storm, it's going to take them at least 40 minutes to reach you. Sir, it's critical that you don't move him. Keep him warm if you can, keep him talking, and wait for the paramedics. 40 minutes. In this rain, in this cold, 40 minutes might as well be forever. Understood, I said and hung up. The stranger's eyes had closed again, his grip on my arm loosening. Hey, I said sharply, touching his face. Stay with me. What's your name? His eyes opened slowly. Cole, he whispered. Cole Brennan. I'm James. Help is coming, Cole, but it's going to take a while. I need you to stay awake, okay? Talk to me. Tell me what happened. I was riding. His voice was weak, words coming in fragments. Storm came out of nowhere, hydroplaned, lost control. Where were you headed? Nowhere, a bitter laugh that turned into a cough. Everywhere, just riding. I looked at the expensive motorcycle, the designer leather jacket he was wearing, the Rolex on his wrist that probably cost more than my truck. This wasn't some kid out for a joyride. This was someone running from something. Takes one to know one. I shrugged off my rain slicker and draped it over his upper body as best I could without moving him. I'm going to grab some things from my truck. I'll be right back. 30 seconds. Don't, the panic in his voice stopped me. I promise you, Cole, I'm not leaving you, just getting supplies. I ran to my truck, grabbed the emergency blanket and first aid kit from behind the seat, and was back beside him in less than 20 seconds. I carefully placed the thermal blanket over him, tucking it around his body. Cold, he murmured, shivering violently. I know, just hang on. I opened the first aid kit, pulling out gauze to press against the cut on his forehead. He winced but didn't pull away. This is a hell of a first meeting, he said, attempting a smile that came out more like a grimace. I've had worse first dates, I replied without thinking and then froze. But Cole just laughed, a real laugh this time despite the pain. Is that what this is, a date? Well, I am on my knees in the mud for you, I said, trying to match his attempt at levity. That's pretty romantic, right? Most romantic thing that's happened to me in months. His eyes were starting to unfocus again. Cole, stay with me. Tell me about yourself. Where are you from? Boston, the word came out slurred. Originally, live in Seattle now, lived, past tense. What do you mean, past tense? But his eyes had closed again, and this time when I called his name, he didn't respond. Panic clawed at my chest. I checked his pulse again, still strong, still breathing, but unconscious and getting colder by the second despite my best efforts. The rain continued to pour. Lightning illuminated the scene in stark flashes, and I knelt there in the mud beside a beautiful stranger, willing the ambulance to arrive faster, willing him to open his eyes again, willing my hands to stop shaking. Because in that moment, kneeling in the storm with Cole's life literally in my hands, I realized something that terrified me more than any injury. I was already invested in whether this stranger lived or died. Already felt a connection I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. Already knew that whatever happened next was going to change everything. I just didn't know how much. The ambulance arrived 37 minutes later, an eternity compressed into every second. I'd kept Cole semi-conscious by talking to him, sometimes getting responses, sometimes just filling the silence with the sound of my voice so he knew he wasn't alone. The paramedics were efficient and professional, carefully stabilizing his neck and spine before transferring him to a backboard. I watched them work, feeling useless and terrified in equal measure. "Are you family?" one of the paramedics asked me. "No, I just found him. I'm the one who called it in." "You probably saved his life," she said. "Keeping him warm, keeping him conscious, that was good work." But as they loaded Cole into the ambulance, his hand reached out, searching. His eyes found mine. "James," he said, his voice desperate, "please." "I'll follow in my truck," I told him, not sure if that's what he was asking but knowing I couldn't just walk away. "I'll be right behind you." He nodded, relief flooding his face before the paramedic closed the doors. I stood in the rain, watching the ambulance disappear down the muddy road, its lights painting the darkness red and blue. Then I ran to my truck. The drive to County General took 50 minutes. The storm had knocked out traffic lights and turned roads into rivers. I white-knuckled the steering wheel the entire way, my mind playing through every worst-case scenario it could conjure. Spinal injuries, paralysis, internal bleeding, brain damage. I didn't even know this kid. Had spent less than an hour with him total. But the thought of him suffering, of him being alone and scared in some hospital room, made my chest feel like it was caving in. By the time I reached the hospital, they'd already taken Cole back for imaging. I stood at the emergency room desk, soaked to the bone, covered in mud, trying to convince a skeptical nurse that I needed to know if he was okay. "Are you family?" she asked, the same question I'd heard from the paramedic. "No, but—" "Then I can't give you any information. Privacy laws, I'm sorry." I wanted to argue, wanted to demand they tell me something, anything, but I could see in her eyes that it wouldn't matter. So I sat in the waiting room with the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead and bad coffee in a styrofoam cup, and I waited. 2 hours passed, then 3. I must have dozed off at some point because I was jolted awake by someone calling my name. James Carver." I looked up to see a doctor in scrubs holding a tablet. She looked exhausted. "Yes, that's me." "Mr. Brennan asked for you," she said. "You're listed as the person who found him at the accident site." "Yes, is he okay?" She smiled, and the relief that washed over me was dizzying. "He's going to be fine. We did a full spinal series and CT scan. No fractures, no spinal cord damage. He's got some severe bruising and soft tissue damage to his lower back and legs, which is why he couldn't move them at the scene. The temporary paralysis was caused by swelling and trauma, but it's already starting to resolve. With physical therapy, he should make a full recovery." I had to sit back down, thank God. "He's asking to see you," the doctor said. "Normally, we don't allow non-family members back, but given the circumstances, I'm willing to make an exception. Room 347. I found Cole's room at the end of a long hallway. The door was partially open, and I could see him lying in the hospital bed, looking small and pale against the white sheets. An IV ran into his arm, and there were monitors beeping softly around him. I knocked gently, "Cole." His eyes opened, and when he saw me, his entire face transformed. "You came." Of course I came. I stepped into the room, suddenly aware of how out of place I looked, still in my muddy clothes, hair plastered to my head. I looked like I crawled out of a swamp. "You look like someone who saved my life," Cole said quietly. I pulled a chair up beside his bed. "The doctor said you're going to be okay. That's what matters." "I thought I was paralyzed," he said, his voice breaking. "When I couldn't move my legs, I thought—" He stopped, swallowing hard. "I've never been so scared in my life." "I know," I said, and without thinking, I reached out and took his hand. His fingers immediately intertwined with mine, holding on like I was an anchor in a storm. We sat like that for a long moment, not speaking, just existing in the quiet relief of knowing he was going to be okay. "Why did you come?" Cole asked finally. "To the hospital, you didn't have to." I needed to know you were all right. But you don't even know me. No, I admitted, but I wanted to. His blue eyes searched my face, and I saw the moment he understood what I was saying. The moment he recognized the same pull I'd felt kneeling in the mud beside him. I ran away, he said suddenly. From Seattle, from my life, from everything. Why? He was quiet for so long I thought he might not answer. Then, my father died 3 weeks ago. Heart attack, completely unexpected. One day he was fine, the next he was gone. And suddenly I was supposed to step into his shoes, take over his company, live the life he'd planned for me. But I couldn't. His voice cracked. I couldn't breathe. So you got on a motorcycle and just rode. Something like that. He looked down at our joined hands. I wasn't trying to end up in Montana. I wasn't trying to end up anywhere. I was just trying to outrun the grief. You can't outrun grief, I said quietly. Trust me, I've tried. What were you running from? Fair question. If he could be honest, so could I. A marriage that was a lie, I said. I spent 20 years pretending to be someone I wasn't, pretending to want things I didn't want. And when I finally admitted the truth, that I'm gay, that I'd been living a lie, it destroyed everything. My wife, my family, my career. So I came out here to rebuild, or hide. I'm still not sure which. Cole's thumb brushed across my knuckles, a gentle, unconscious gesture that made my heart stutter. How long have you been here? 3 years. Has it helped, the hiding? Sometimes, I said honestly. Sometimes the quiet is exactly what I need. Sometimes it's just lonely. I understand lonely, Cole said softly. A nurse came in then, interrupting the moment to check Cole's vitals. I started to pull my hand away, but Cole held on tighter. It's okay, he said to me, then to the nurse, he's staying. The nurse raised an eyebrow but didn't comment, just did her checks and left us alone again. They're going to keep me overnight for observation, Cole said. Make sure the swelling continues to go down. They want to start physical therapy tomorrow. That's good. The bike's totaled, and I don't exactly have anywhere to go after this. I knew what I was about to offer was crazy. Knew that inviting a stranger to stay at my isolated ranch was the kind of thing that only happened in movies. But I also knew that the thought of Cole checking into some motel, alone and recovering, made me feel physically ill. Stay with me, I said, at the ranch, just until you're back on your feet. I've got plenty of room and you shouldn't be alone while you're recovering. James, I can't. You can, I interrupted, and you should, unless you've got somewhere else to be. I don't, he admitted. I left Seattle with no plan, no destination, just me and the bike. Then it's settled. When they discharge you, you come home with me. Home, the word felt right in a way that terrified me. Cole studied my face for a long moment. Why are you doing this, really? Because when I touched you, I felt something I thought was dead. Because your eyes are the color of the sky I haven't let myself look at properly in years. Because you're broken and I'm broken and maybe together we're a little less shattered. But what I said was, because everyone deserves a safe place to heal. Even strangers. Especially strangers, I said. Sometimes strangers are the only ones who can really see us. Cole's eyes filled with tears and he blinked them back quickly. Thank you. I don't know how I'll ever repay you. Get better, I said simply. That's payment enough. But as I sat there holding his hand in the sterile hospital room, listening to the monitors beep steadily, I knew I was lying to both of us. Because what I wanted from Cole Brennan had nothing to do with repayment, and everything to do with the way my heart had started beating again the moment those blue eyes opened in the rain. I brought Cole home to the ranch 2 days later. The doctors had been cautiously optimistic. The swelling in his lower back had gone down significantly, and he'd regained full sensation in both legs. Movement was still difficult. His muscles were weak from the trauma, and standing for more than a few minutes left him shaking with exhaustion. but the paralysis that had terrified both of us that night in the storm was gone. I'd spent those 2 days preparing. I'd moved him into the guest room on the ground floor, the one with the attached bathroom so he wouldn't have to navigate stairs. I'd stocked the kitchen with actual food instead of my usual bachelor fare. I'd even cleaned, really cleaned, not just my usual surface tidying. When I pulled the truck up to the cabin, Cole was silent, staring out the window at the mountains rising in the distance. "It's beautiful," he said quietly. "It grows on you," I replied, coming around to help him out of the truck. He was still moving slowly, carefully, like someone learning to trust their body again. I offered my arm, and he took it without hesitation, leaning on me as we made our way up the porch steps. "Welcome to Carver Ranch," I said, opening the door. "It's not much, but it's home." Cole stepped inside, and I tried to see it through his eyes. The cabin was rustic, wood floors, exposed beams, a stone fireplace that dominated the main room, comfortable but sparse, a place built for solitude. "It's perfect," Cole said, and the way he said it made me think he meant it. I showed him to his room. He sank onto the bed with a sigh of relief, and I could see the exhaustion pulling at him. "Rest," I said. "I'll make dinner." "James," he caught my hand as I turned to go. "Thank you for all of this." "Stop thanking me," I said, but I smiled. "Just focus on getting better." That first week fell into an easy rhythm. I'd wake early to tend to the horses and cattle, then come back to make breakfast. Cole would be up by then, moving slowly around the cabin, testing his limits. We'd eat together, talking about everything and nothing. I learned that he'd been an architect in Seattle, working for his father's firm. That he designed buildings he was proud of, but had always felt like he was living in someone else's shadow. That he'd come out to his family at 21, and while they'd accepted it, they'd never really talked about it again. "It was easier for them to pretend," Cole explained one morning over coffee. "Pretend I didn't have a boyfriend. Pretend relationships weren't something that applied to me, and I let them because fighting felt exhausting." "I understand that," I said. "The exhaustion of constantly explaining yourself." "Is that why you came out here, to stop explaining?" "Partly, but also because I needed to figure out who I was when no one was watching. When I wasn't performing the role of straight husband, successful businessman, normal guy." "And did you figure it out?" I looked at him across the table, his dark hair still mussed from sleep, those blue eyes watching me with an intensity that made my breath catch. "I'm starting to," I said. The physical therapy exercises the hospital had prescribed were brutal. I'd watch Cole push through the pain, his jaw clenched, sweat beading on his forehead as he worked to rebuild strength in muscles that had been traumatized. He never complained, but I could see the frustration in his eyes when his body wouldn't cooperate. "I used to run marathons," he said one afternoon, after collapsing on the couch following a particularly difficult session. "Last year I completed an Ironman triathlon. Now I can barely walk from the bedroom to the kitchen without needing to sit down." "You will again," I said. "Your body needs time." "I hate waiting." "I know, but recovery isn't linear. Some days will be better than others." He looked at me, vulnerability written across his face. "Will you help me with the exercises? I know it's asking a lot, but—" "Of course I will." So that became part of our routine. Twice a day, I'd guide him through the stretches and strengthening exercises. My hands on his legs, his back, supporting him as he worked through the movements. It was intimate in a way that had nothing to do with romance and everything to do with trust. He was trusting me with his broken body, and I was learning not to be afraid of that responsibility. But there were other moments, moments that had nothing to do with physical therapy and everything to do with the way my heart would skip when he laughed. The way I'd catch him watching me sometimes, his expression unreadable. The way the cabin felt less like a hiding place and more like a home. 2 weeks after the accident, Cole was strong enough to walk down to the barn with me. I introduced him to the horses, Maggie, an aging mare who'd been with me since I bought the ranch, and her son Dakota, a spirited gelding who liked to think he was tougher than he actually was. "They're beautiful," Cole said, stroking Maggie's nose. She nuzzled against his hand and he smiled, the first truly carefree smile I'd seen since the accident. "You ride?" I asked. "Used to, when I was a kid. My grandfather had a place in Vermont with horses. We'll get you back on one when you're ready." "I'd like that." We stood there in the barn, surrounded by the warm smell of hay and horses, and something shifted between us. The air felt charged, heavy with words we weren't saying. "James," Cole started, then stopped. "Yeah." "Nothing, never mind." But I knew it wasn't nothing. I could feel it in the way he looked at me, in the tension that seemed to build every time we were close. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand what was happening. I'd spent 3 years building walls around myself, convincing myself that isolation was healing, that I was better off alone. But Cole had walked into my life, or rather, crashed into it, and suddenly those walls felt less like protection and more like a prison. I was falling for him, had been falling since that moment in the rain when his hand gripped my arm and he begged me not to leave. The realization terrified me, because Cole wasn't staying. He was healing, getting stronger every day, and soon he'd be well enough to leave, to go back to Seattle or move on to wherever people like him belonged. And I'd be here, alone again, except now the silence would feel different. Now it would feel like absence. I must have finally dozed off, because I woke to the sound of someone crying. For a moment I thought I'd imagined it. Then I heard it again, muffled sobs coming from Cole's room. I was out of bed and down the hall before I could think better of it. I knocked softly on his door. "Cole, you okay?" The crying stopped abruptly. "I'm fine, go back to bed." But his voice was thick with tears, and I couldn't just walk away. "I'm coming in," I said, and opened the door. Cole was sitting up in bed, his face wet with tears, his arms wrapped around himself. The moonlight streaming through the window illuminated him in silver and shadow. "I'm sorry," he said immediately. "I didn't mean to wake you." "What's wrong?" I sat on the edge of the bed, and when he didn't pull away, I took that as permission to stay. "Nightmare," he admitted. "About the accident. Except in the dream, you never found me. I was just lying there in the rain, alone, unable to move, and no one came." Without thinking, I pulled him into my arms. He collapsed against my chest, and I held him while he cried, one hand stroking his hair, the other rubbing slow circles on his back. "I've got you," I murmured. "You're safe, I've got you." I know, but he pulled back enough to look at me, his eyes red and swollen. "What if you hadn't come? What if you'd been a different kind of person? What if—" "But I did come," I interrupted gently, "and I'm not going anywhere." "Promise?" His voice was small, vulnerable in a way that broke my heart. "I promise." We stayed like that, wrapped up in each other, until his breathing evened out and the tears stopped. But even then I didn't let go, couldn't let go. "James," Cole whispered, "can I tell you something?" "Anything." I think about that night constantly, about the moment I opened my eyes and saw you there in the rain, and I keep thinking, what if that wasn't just chance? What if I was supposed to crash? What if I was supposed to find you? My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could feel it. "Cole, I know it's crazy. I know we barely know each other, but I feel—" He stopped, struggling for words. "When I'm with you, I feel like I can breathe again, like maybe losing everything wasn't the end. Maybe it was just making room for something different." "I feel it too," I admitted, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "God help me, I feel it too." Cole's hand came up to cup my face, his thumb brushing across my cheek. "Then why do you look so scared?" "Because you're going to leave," I said, voicing my deepest fear. You're going to get better and realize you don't need me anymore, and you're going to walk away. And I don't know if I can survive that. What if I don't want to leave? Cole asked. What if I want to stay? For how long? A week? A month? Until the next adventure calls. Cole, you're 26 years old. You have your whole life ahead of you. You can't spend it hidden away on a ranch in the middle of nowhere with a 42-year-old man who's too scared to live in the real world. Stop, Cole said firmly. Stop deciding for me what I want. Stop assuming you know what's best for me. Then tell me, I challenged. Tell me what you want. And Cole, brave, beautiful Cole, didn't hesitate. I want you, he said. I want this. I want mornings drinking coffee and watching the sunrise. I want to help you with the horses. I want to learn everything about this place that you love. And I want to figure out who I am when I'm not trying to be who everyone else needs me to be. Cole, I'm not asking for forever, he continued. I'm not asking for promises neither of us can keep. I'm just asking for now, for today and tomorrow and however many days we get. Can you give me that? I looked into those blue eyes, saw the hope and fear and desperate honesty there, and I knew I was lost. Yes, I whispered, yes. And then I kissed him. It was gentle at first, tentative, like we were both afraid the other might pull away. But when Cole's hand slid into my hair, when he made a small sound of need against my mouth, everything changed. The kiss deepened, became desperate, became everything we'd been holding back since that night in the rain. His hands were everywhere, my face, my shoulders, pulling me closer. And I went willingly, gathering him against me, trying to convey with my body what words couldn't express. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cole was smiling. Stay, he whispered. Tonight just hold me. So I did. I climbed into bed beside him and pulled him against my chest, his head tucked under my chin, our legs tangled together. And for the first time in 3 years, I didn't feel alone. I felt found. The next 3 weeks were the happiest I'd been in years. Cole continued to grow stronger. By the end of the 3rd week, he could walk without assistance, could help with light ranch work, could even mount Maggie with only minimal help. His laughter became a constant soundtrack, filling the cabin with warmth I hadn't realized was missing. We fell into each other like people who'd been waiting their whole lives for permission. Mornings tangled in bed, stealing kisses while the coffee brewed. Afternoons working side by side, our hands finding each other in quiet moments. Evenings on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold while we talked about everything and nothing. It felt too good to be true. It was. The call came on a Tuesday morning in late November. I was in the barn when I heard Cole's phone ringing from the cabin. He'd been getting calls all month. His mother, his business partner, creditors trying to reach him about his father's estate. He'd ignored most of them. This one he answered. I knew something was wrong the moment I walked into the cabin. Cole was standing in the kitchen, his phone pressed to his ear, his face pale. I understand, he was saying. Yes, I'll figure something out. Okay, bye. He hung up and just stood there, staring at nothing. What's wrong? I asked. That was my father's lawyer, Cole said, his voice flat. There's a problem with the estate. My father's business partner is contesting the will, claiming my father wasn't of sound mind when he named me as primary beneficiary. If I don't come back to Seattle and handle this in person, I could lose everything, the company, the house, the assets, everything my father built. My stomach dropped. When do you have to leave? As soon as possible. There's a hearing in 10 days. I need to meet with lawyers, go through documents, prepare a defense. He finally looked at me and his eyes were filled with anguish. I don't want to go. But you have to. I don't care about the money, Cole said desperately. I don't care about the company. I'd walk away from all of it if it meant I could stay here with you. You don't mean that. I do. James, I've been happier here in the past month than I've been in years. Maybe ever. The thought of going back to that life, of losing this, his voice broke. I crossed to him, taking his face in my hands. Listen to me. This is your father's legacy we're talking about. You can't just abandon it because things got complicated. You owe it to him and to yourself to at least try to save it. And what about us? We'll figure it out, I said, even though I had no idea how. Long distance, visits when we can manage them. That's not enough, James. I want to wake up next to you. I want to fall asleep in your arms. He stopped, tears streaming down his face. I want everything. So do I admitted, but sometimes wanting isn't enough. Cole pulled away from me, anger flashing in his eyes. Don't do that. Don't give up on us before we've even really begun. I'm not giving up. I'm being realistic. No, you're being a coward, Cole shot back. You're so terrified of getting hurt again that you're willing to let me walk away without a fight. That's not fair. Isn't it? You've spent 3 years hiding out here, convincing yourself that isolation is the same as healing. But it's not. It's just another form of running away. His words hit like a physical blow. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I, James? I love you. The world stopped. What? I love you, Cole repeated, his voice shaking but certain. I know it's fast, I know it's crazy, but I fell in love with you that night in the rain when you promised you wouldn't leave me. And I fall more in love with you every day. Every time you smile at me. Every time you touch me like I'm something precious. Every time you look at me like I'm not a burden or a disappointment, but just me. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only stare at this beautiful, brave man who just handed me his heart. Say something, Cole pleaded. I can't, I whispered. Cole, I can't. Can't what? Can't love me back, or can't admit that you do. Both, neither, I don't know. I turned away, unable to bear the hope in his eyes. You're asking me to risk everything, to open myself up to the possibility of losing you, and I don't know if I'm strong enough for that. Then I'll be strong enough for both of us, Cole said. James, please, don't let fear steal this from us. But the fear was already there, coiling in my chest like a serpent, because I did love him, had loved him from the moment his hand found mine in the hospital. And the thought of losing him, whether to distance, to his old life, to the inevitable realization that he could do better than a broken rancher hiding from the world, was unbearable. I need time, I said. I need to think. How much time? I don't know. Cole was silent for a long moment. Then, I'm leaving tomorrow. There's a flight out of Billings at noon. I'll take care of this mess in Seattle and then I'm coming back, whether you're ready or not, whether you believe in us or not. I'm coming back, James, because you're worth fighting for. We're worth fighting for. He walked out of the kitchen, leaving me standing there alone. That night we didn't sleep in the same bed. I heard him moving around his room, packing, and every sound felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I wanted to go to him, wanted to tell him I loved him too, that I'd been in love with him since the beginning, that the thought of him leaving was killing me. But the words wouldn't come. In the morning, I drove him to the airport in silence. The 2-hour drive felt like both an eternity and not nearly long enough. At the terminal, I helped him with his bag, and we stood there awkwardly, neither of us sure what to say. I meant what I said, Cole told me. I'm coming back. Cole. No, he pressed a finger to my lips. Don't say anything you'll regret. Just think about what I said, about us, about what we could have if you just let yourself take the risk. Then he kissed me, soft and sweet and heartbreaking, and walked into the airport without looking back. I drove home in a daze. The cabin felt empty without him. Every room was filled with his absence. I kept expecting to hear his laughter, to smell the coffee he'd started making every morning, to feel his hand slip into mine. Days passed, then a week. Cole texted occasionally, updates about the legal battle, assurances that he missed me, reminders that he was coming back. But I could feel the distance growing between us, could feel the reality of his old life pulling him back in. 10 days after he left, he called. "I won," he said, and I could hear the exhaustion in his voice. "The judge ruled in my favor. The company is mine. Everything's mine." "That's great," I said and meant it. "Your father would be proud." "James, I need to tell you something." My heart sank. Here it was. The moment he told me he'd realized what a mistake this all was, that he belonged in Seattle, not on some ranch with a man twice his age. "The company needs me," Cole continued. "They've been barely holding it together since my father died. If I don't step up, if I don't take charge, it's all going to fall apart. Hundreds of people will lose their jobs." "I understand." "I don't think you do." He paused. "I'm selling it." "What?" "The company. I'm selling it to a firm that specializes in acquisitions and transitions. They'll keep everyone employed, maintain the legacy my father built. But I won't have to run it. I won't have to stay in Seattle." "Cole, you can't." "I can, and I am. Because I meant what I said. You're worth more to me than any company, any legacy, any expectation anyone ever had of me." His voice softened. "I love you, James, and if you'll have me, I want to come home." Tears were streaming down my face. Home. To you, to the ranch, to the life we started building together, if you want me, if you're ready. And suddenly, all the fear that had been paralyzing me didn't matter anymore, because Cole was offering me everything I'd been too afraid to ask for. A future, a partner, a love that was real and messy and terrifying and perfect. "I love you," I said, the words finally breaking free. "God, Cole, I love you so much. I was just too scared to say it." And now I'm still scared, but I'm more scared of losing you. I could hear the smile in his voice when he said, "Then you won't. I'll be home in 3 days. Wait for me." "I've been waiting for you my whole life," I said. 3 more days is nothing." The first snow of the season was falling, dusting the ranch in pristine white. I stood on the porch, coffee in hand, watching the world transform. Behind me, the door opened and closed. Arms wrapped around my waist, and Cole's chin came to rest on my shoulder. "Morning," he murmured, pressing a kiss to my neck. "Morning, sleep well. Always do when you're there." We stood like that, watching the snow fall, comfortable in the silence that had once terrified me and now felt like peace. Cole had been back for almost a year. In that time, we'd built something real. He'd started a small architectural firm in Billings, designing sustainable buildings that honored the Montana landscape. I'd expanded the ranch, adding a small stable where we offered riding lessons to local kids. But more than that, we'd built a life, a home, a future that belonged to both of us. "I have something for you," Cole said, pulling back and reaching into his pocket. He handed me a small box, and my hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a ring, simple, silver, perfect. "It's not a proposal," Cole said quickly. "Not yet, not until you're ready, but it's a promise that I'm here, that I'm staying, that every day I choose you, I choose us." I looked at this man who'd crashed into my life on a storm-dark night. This beautiful, brave, impossible man who taught me that love wasn't something to fear, but something to fight for. "I choose you too," I said, and slipped the ring onto my finger. Cole's answering smile was brighter than the snow-covered mountains. "Forever." "Forever," I agreed, and kissed him as the snow fell around us, blanketing our world in new beginnings. Because that's what love is. Not the absence of fear, but the courage to risk everything anyway. Not the promise that nothing will ever hurt, but the commitment to face the hurt together. I'd found Cole in the mud and rain, broken and terrified. But what I'd felt in that moment, that connection, that pull, that sense of purpose, had saved us both. Sometimes destruction is just creation in disguise. Sometimes the end of one story is just the beginning of another. And sometimes, when you're brave enough to reach down and help someone up, you find they're reaching back, not just for rescue, but for forever.